We'll go ahead and start, everybody. Good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and start. Our moderator, she is running a little late, but when I got a call about 10 minutes ago, she just got off the freeway. So hopefully she should be here in about, hopefully another 5-10 minutes, because she thought she'd be here about 6:20. So we'll go ahead anyways to start, but what we'll probably do, just as a reminder, before you speak, make sure your little green light's on, because I guess a few kind of still forgot last time. So what we'll just go do is we'll just go around, introduce ourselves, and then we'll go ahead and proceed. I'm Leonard McLaren. Right now I'm the interim director for special ed. Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
My name is Joyce Ye. I'm the budget director. I represent business office.
I'm Kathy Batista. I'm a special education teacher at Don Benito School. Leanne Brown.
Remember to turn your mic off.
It's me. Okay. Leanne Brown, community member.
Don Short, parent.
Carol Locke, teacher at Marshall.
John Huntley, a teacher at John Muir High School.
Judy McKinley, special ed instructional assistant at Field Elementary, and I'm president of the Los Angeles Learning Disabilities Association.
Louise Bell, special education parent since September 2001.
Jean B. Noggle, general ed teacher at Field Elementary.
Susan Goh, I'm a special ed teacher at Roosevelt.
Ruth Ann All, Slippa at Sierra Madre Elementary.
Melvin Washington, school liaison for Hillsides.
Delfino Hernandez, Hillside School Liaison.
Jim Albanese, principal, Focus Point Academy and PALS.
Warren Skidmore, parent, and I'm on the CAC committee.
My name is Herman Barredo. I'm a parent and past chair of the CAC.
Jennifer Smith, assistant principal, Marshall Fundamental.
I got to turn it on too. I forgot. I'm reminding everybody else to turn it on. I forget to turn it on myself. But anyways, what you should have in front of you is you should just have just a few documents. You'll have our continuation of our agenda, minutes from February 22nd. You have some information for, it's called the list of high-performing schools and districts. Actually, this came from Mr. Costello. He was doing some research, so he found that. So I told him I will make copies, and that's information for you to look at. You should also have a page definition of looking at inclusion. This was the small group that was working on that, trying to gather the different information. And then you should have also a PowerPoint presentation on the budget. Should be all the documents you have. Just as a reminder from our last meeting, I kind of mentioned that none of the chiefs will actually be attending tonight because they had a board meeting yesterday. So that was kind of one of the things, if we were going to have this, they just wanted to make sure that the task force recognized that they won't be here today. So, but we're still different parts representing those different groups. I think probably the best thing we'll just go with, why don't we go ahead and start with the minutes, if you can review those, and then we'll just need a motion. Oh, there is a change. I know there is one change, because Mr. Costello did ask me to add a couple of things. One thing that we will do, but I know I have to talk with Sharon with this one, because she had all the ones when we were working on all the definitions on the different butcher paper. So I just need to get those from her, because that's one thing Mr. Costello asked us to include in the minutes. So once I have that, once it's typed, we'll just kind of, pop it in as an attachment. And the other correction that he had, let me find it real quick. Task force, nothing has been adopted or finalized. It was basically on his comments there on the second page where it says Mike Costello comments that the emphasis of the task force is to move forward. He just wanted to make sure it was more elaborated, where it was saying that basically as a task force or as a district we should be basing our actions where we feel we need to be rather than where the district has been in the past. So I'm just going to include that kind of a statement here in the minutes.
on, I- the email I sent you, and Susan?
Susie.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think it is. Where I suggested so that we can make certain we can always clearly identify what set of minutes we're looking at and anybody else who's reading the minutes. I suggested that we add a footer to the minutes that indicate that they're the minutes of the Special Education Task Force, and for which date and page, let's say, 1 of 3. Because if you'll notice on these minutes, once you get beyond, there are no page numbers, and once you get beyond page 1, you can't even identify what they're minutes for.
Cool, thank you.
I would like to agree with Louise on that. It is very disturbing when you get things out of order and then you can't put them back in order because they have not been designated as to what day they were on or what page they are.
Anything with the content within the minutes? Any changes, or is there a motion?
Yeah, regarding, on page 2, it says Louise Bell moves to table the minutes. I was specific. I'd like to have it added that I wanted the minutes tabled because we hadn't had a chance to read them. We had just gotten them the night of the 22nd, but we were being asked to review several pages of minutes. I think they were maybe 7 pages, and vote on them. And we hadn't had a chance to read them, so I would like to have the fact that I noted that we hadn't had a chance to read the minutes added to the comment that I made, even though, you know, the vote was taken anyway.
Hey there, how you doing? What is? Any others? Is there?
Could I ask that we try to distribute the minutes? This is things that Louise has asked. Try to put more effort into distributing the documentation and the minutes before the meetings. You know, we do what we can, but essentially there's no minutes are emailed out or anything beforehand, or we could at least try and do that that sort of stuff. I've just want to note I've started to collect some information on the CAC website in a folder, which is task force information, and if people want, I can tell them what the address is, or fire it out to everyone, whatever.
So yeah, so when you finish the minutes, just give them to me so I can send them out.
Okay.
It's not a problem. Is there a motion to pass the minutes as with the additions? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Okay, motion goes. Okay. You ready, or do you need some more time? Okay. It should have been oh, you know what, I think I forgot to turn that one. Yeah, I can print it real quick. I can make copies of it. Yeah, it was added, but yeah, I forgot to print it. Okay, that's no problem. Yeah, go ahead and start. It's always one.
Let me attach myself. Okay, good evening, everyone. We have reviewed the minutes One of the first things that I'd like for us to pick up where we left off is in the philosophy and terminology as defined by IDEA. And we had a subcommittee that after each group, if you recall, each group developed a definition for inclusion. And then we agreed that we were creating a subcommittee, and the subcommittee would then take those 3 definitions and would then work on those to create one overall definition. And I have to say that Mr. Albanese, Mr. Costello, Ms. Watts did a fantastic job. The process was pretty straightforward. We began with, oh, come on over. We began with taking a look at each of the definitions that were developed by each of the groups. And then we said that we were going to then look at what were really the principles and the ideas from each of those that we really felt should be included in one definition. So there are words that came out: inclusive, guide, expectation, challenge, push to higher goals, not look at where we are now, but look to where we want to be. Realistic, idealistic with realistic ways of doing it. Not a privilege to be earned. Access to core curriculum with social benefits. Belonging, and all students. And so from that, I'm going to ask if you will just take one, pass it around. From that, there was one definition that came out, and then the group kind of sat on it for a few days. And there were some suggestions to actually refine it even more. So after you receive your document, I'd like for you to read version 1, and then read version 2, and then we'll engage in a brief discussion about it. So again, this is the product of your subcommittee. We met last Thursday night. I think it was about 3.5 hours of work. We left at about 10:30. And they worked very hard to prepare something that they believe would be representative of what the task force would like inclusion to be. Does everyone have a copy? I'll come and get it. Oh, no, are there any parents in the back that didn't receive one? This is my tether, so.
I have a question. What is the inclusion copy that we were passed out with today's papers?
That was the very first version. That's version 1 that you see at the top. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So version 1 was the email that you received. Usually I have a place to stick this, but tonight I don't. Yeah. Okay, has everyone had a chance to read? Great. The group was very proud of the work they did and couldn't wait, really. We're very excited to get your reaction. I'm actually sorry that Monica's not here because she really, really had a tremendous amount of input in the development, the selection of words. The words were very, very important. We sat there with thesaurus, dictionary. The words were very, very important. So please know that the subcommittee did not take this assignment lightly. But at this time, version 1, as I said, is what you received via email. Version 2 are changes that the subcommittee wanted to bring forward after their work was done. They are not tied to either one. They love the work they did, but it's coming to the group now for even further refinement. Or if you believe that one of these is fine as it stands, but it's going to be up to the group.
Question about it.
Yes.
A question about administrators. Does that include the board, the Pasadena, board of directors of the school district, or is that, does that not include them? In this definition where it says a community of students, is the board part of the administrators?
I believe the definition would have been inclusive of the school board. Am I correct, or are we talking school site administration only?
I don't think it was just school site administration, but I think administration in general. We did not discuss the board at all. My memory of the meeting is we did not discuss the board. But
I think we need to have clarification there because that has been, I think, a major challenge that parents of special education students in the PUSD have felt an absence of support by the board for special education. So I think it's imperative for us to clarify that.
Okay, help me to understand, is the outcome that you're looking for, would you like to see the board included in that definition of administrators or just simply represented in it?
It's imperative. Without the board's complete support, I don't think we're going to make significant progress because the superintendent reports to the board.
Okay, so we do want to ensure that that definition of administrators or the board is represented in the statement.
We might need to break out and say board
and the Board of Education.
The board, start with them because they're at the helm.
Okay. Are there any other observations? Other observations?
The SELPA,
I'm sorry.
Herman, do you think the SELPA, the CAC SELPA is part of administration or should be mentioned in here too? I don't know.
Well, I missed the last two meetings, so I don't know to the extent of the conversation that was had. If the definition of inclusion, is it so that the district adopt it to embrace it and promote it, or is it for school sites, or is it to create culture?
It's a district definition that the subcommittee believes will impact the culture.
Okay.
Yeah, by being a shared statement, a shared goal. That takes us back to those words, a shared expectation.
Okay. I do have something that I was reading, and it did, the definition that is here before us does jump out at me when it says general education setting, because when I think of inclusion, I don't think of boundaries being drawn. I think inclusion in itself is inclusive, and so you don't need to start creating a division in terms of where you're going to allow inclusion, because I think you could also have a typical child that is sent to say a special day class and is providing some reverse mainstreaming, and so is inclusion, how is the definition going to fit in that setting? Anyway, so the general, for all students in general education setting, I would rather it just be all students at a school campus. Every student shouldn't be just general ed setting, because then we're already distinguishing. And then I did jump into the CHIME model. I looked at their definition, and it'd only take me 30 seconds to read this to you. The rationale for inclusion is based on the belief that important academic, social, and ethical skills and attitudes are developed when students with various abilities, needs, and backgrounds learn together. A well-established body of research that is supported by federal and state laws indicate that inclusion of children with disabilities benefits both students with and without disabilities alike. So I don't know, there's a couple little things in there that I think could be incorporated in our definition. I like the idea that that there is benefit. I think the community, if we had a CHIME-like school where everything was in place, they'd want their kids in a setting where everybody was on board and it was collaborative, and they could see the benefit of their typical child benefiting from being around a child that learns differently. So I would like something like that incorporated that's a little more general, that talks about the benefits of typical children benefiting.
Okay. Other comments? I saw a hand.
Idea Federal Law, Section 300.551, continuum of alternative placements, and it requires under A, that each public agency shall ensure that a continuum of alternative placements is available to meet the needs of children with disabilities for special education and related services. I have a major issue with us only talking about inclusion, because there are many students whose needs are not met in an inclusion setting. And their setting is dependent upon an IEP. So some children do not benefit from an inclusion setting. And I think we need to keep in mind that the law requires a full continuum of services, which I don't believe that this statement really addresses.
You know, Mr. Albanese, that was actually part of our discussion, not specifically those words, full continuum of services, but would you like to speak to that?
We did spend some time on this issue, and I'm sorry my cohorts aren't here to discuss this also, because I always worry when it's just my memory left to report. But my memory is that we discussed the continuum, but we said our goal here is to discuss one piece of the continuum. We're discussing inclusion. And so what we were trying to do, our charge as we understood it as we went away from this committee, was to look at what inclusion was. And that's all we were going to do. Now, if we're going to talk about a continuum of services and those kinds of things, that's another task this committee could take on. But this was very specific in our minds, that we were looking at inclusion, not the full continuum.
Okay, I don't have an issue with that, and I think the definition of full inclusion needed to be made. I think, though, that we need to understand that we are responsible for all the special ed students in this district, and not only those that are in inclusion classes. So, because children have varying needs, and sometimes inclusion is not an appropriate placement for them. So I just want that to be on the table, because only dealing with inclusion is not providing a full continuum of services for our students.
And from the conversation last Thursday night, the group the subcommittee shared that they believe that would be met, but apparently it's not as clear as the subcommittee thought it would be through this statement. viewed as individuals, and needs are met with the active delivery of support services and modifications.
Okay, basically, this was a definition of inclusion, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it really only addresses one element of special ed in the district. So I just want to make that clear, that we have other issues to deal with besides this.
Correct, thank you. It's okay, it's all right. Other comments? Suggestions? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to say that it was a pleasure to work with Mr. Albanese and with Mike. Is Mike here? Where is he? He's not here. Yeah, it was a pleasure to work with them in trying to come up with something that represented what everybody had as an idea of inclusion. And sometimes we did things like just break out the basic, that really in-depth book on inclusion, which is the dictionary on what words meant. And would just, take that out and look up words and see if they meant what we had hoped they, or at least meant close enough to what we thought everybody. But we left enough room where if people wanted to change things, they were welcome to change it. But my son was there at the time, and he was extremely impressed with us coming up with this. So he really was very impressed. He told me he liked it a lot.
Oh, good. It was a pleasure.
And he's
having you.
autistic, so, it's good to have somebody there who might know.
All right, are there other suggestions? Louise?
I remember in the definition that the group I worked on offered, I think there was a key word there. I'm trying to remember what it was. But it sort of, I think it may have been that the special education students would feel so comfortable, or it's a word that doesn't appear here, but I vaguely recall when we...
I can actually read it for you. Providing an environment in general ed classrooms / school and extracurricular activities where special ed students can access core curriculum and develop social skills and confidence with the support and services needed to meet IEP goals.
Confidence. That's what's missing.
If I remember, it was, inner confidence, and you're hitting it.
I just think that's kind of sort of an important word. It's been my observation that I see a lot of, developmentally or intellectually delayed students not exhibiting a lot of confidence when they're in an inclusion setting.
Go ahead.
I know exactly what you mean, because my son was included in the general ed classroom from very young, all the way until he, left here. So I thought the concept I was trying to make sure embody was that disability is just part of the human experience. It's not something that should be isolated out, like maybe they can come along or something to that effect, that they actually had a right to be there. So what we were trying to do by making it an individual rather than individuals was trying to make it like the whole world benefits, because when you get out in the real world, these kids who grow up into middle schoolers and grow up into adults are going to be there. And you start learning how to manage and deal with them and deal with their gifts and all that they have to offer now. And we're doing a disservice not to help them with that now. And just they get out in the community and they think that they're just a joke, or the kids that are in this special room. So I don't know if maybe that kind of addresses like what you're thinking, Louise.
Well, I just...
because
I
I really was
all-
worried about that too. I really was.
I think the definition is all about the special education students, though. I mean, I know we want them to be in with general ed, et cetera, and we want it to be a symbiotic relationship. But if our students are actually going to advance academically, I think they do need to feel confident. I think even regular ed students, when you feel confident, you kind of sort of think you can do just about anything. And I've noticed amongst the population of special education students I've observed, and also a sibling of mine who was more severe, there was always a big void in the confidence area, and that's an area you really have to push. And when we included that, and I don't know who added it to the definition, but it just stuck in my mind as such an important word to be part of the definition of inclusion for the special education students.
Thank you, Warren.
'Cause there's, in version 2, there's character development, which seems to encompass everything we've talked about for the last couple of minutes. I think character development, self-confidence.
Jim.
We spent a large amount of time discussing the 3 issues. And Mike, please jump in if you'd like to talk to this issue. I'm very happy to yield the floor. But we had 2 elements of academically and socially, and we couldn't think of a way to word the confidence piece. And so we all said, well, maybe we can throw it out to the group, maybe we can do this. And Mike went back and he came up with, some words to try and encompass it, and that's what you see in version 2, and we all went, yeah, that's what we were trying to get at there. And we struggled with it, and Mike, maybe you can help me out.
No, that we always felt that there was a third component. It wasn't just academic and it wasn't just social, but that inner strength, whatever, was more than just a single word. So we were trying to find that title or that grouping that would encompass empathy and compassion and confidence and all these other things. And we struggled to get there, and so that's why character development or that was we felt was an all-encompassing way to get all those those individual
Character
qualities.
was the word that was selected, but they felt that something needed to go with character, and development, I believe, is what was settled on. We have a hand here.
Okay. I'd like to mention that these 3 areas are kind of what we call in special ed law a 3-pronged test as to whether the placement is correct, and that is improved academic performance, socialization, and then in the special ed law, it's behavior that's appropriate to the setting. But I like this character development. It implies behavior that's appropriate and that's improving. And I think with our RTI for behavior, it's going to really embrace this whole issue. So I really, congratulations, because you guys hit that on, really hit that on the head, and it's very consistent with what special ed is supposed to be doing for kids. So.
I mean, another word that we looked at was emotional, the whole inner feelings, but that has labels and meanings and misconstruings in and of itself. So we wanted to try to do something that was safe yet incorporate Constitution and all of the other aspects.
Okay. Well, we've heard quite a bit. I want to wrap this section up. Are there any other comments? And thank you so much. They really, really did work really, really hard. I mean, the dictionary was already a little tattered, but by the time they were done. Yes, sir.
I'm looking for words like respect and dignity, and I'm not seeing them in either one of these definitions. I understand the word character is there, but character can't really be operationally defined. A word like dignity and respect get a little closer, I think, to the kind of character that you might be seeking in an inclusive community. And I don't mean to and I'm not critiquing, but the accessing the core curriculum with their peers, is it necessary for with their peers? Accessing the core curriculum, all students. And if we're going to speak in terms of inclusion, scaffolding from what Mr. Barrero said. We don't need to define. We don't need to use terms like general ed or their peers. If we're talking about inclusion, doesn't that suggests already everyone?
That's actually, you've actually just the last exchange of emails between the group was right around there. So you could have been a part of the subcommittee. Because I want you to understand that the subcommittee realized how important these statements were going to be. And every word, they literally, you know, there was blood and sweat over every word. Is this descriptive? Is this what we really mean? What does this imply? What does this, what type of connotation does this word carry with it? And so that Mike's last email was around peers just this afternoon. So, you know, the subcommittee, we're not done. They'll go back. They'll take into consideration the things that were discussed tonight, work on it, make it even better than it is. Mind you, this is a first. This in itself is historic. And so we want to continue to work towards refinement, improvement, and you know, make this better. So with that, Mr. Huntley?
I just want to address something in the language here. I hear what you're all saying about the general education setting. The reason why I see it really beneficial for our students in Pasadena to have the language in the general education setting is I feel that if you didn't have those words there, some people might actually pass off a strictly SDC setting or some other more restrictive setting as without that language. They might say, oh, well, the kid's in inclusion now because they're with their peers and they're fostering belonging for all the students, but they're accessing the standards, but they're not in the general education classroom. On our site, we have all students have access to general education setting. In our SH classes, there are students who have access to general education electives, and they have support there, and we consider that a form of inclusion. But if we were to take out this language there, somebody might say, well, these students are able to go to SDC classrooms, so they're able to experience inclusion, but that's just another SDC service.
Segregated class.
Yeah.
The goal was to be general so that there was openness for discussion, but also we felt the need for a really detailed level of specificity, because ultimately 5 years down the road, when we have a culture of inclusion, all this stuff will seem overkill. But we're looking at where we're coming from now, where everybody wants to argue both sides of the equation, and without having general education in there, people could say I am accessing the core curriculum and I'm sitting by myself in a corner halfway down the hall away from everybody else. With the peers, we felt was very important too, because with peers, the way we approached it was with other students. Again, you could be completely segregated and be with 1 or 2 or 3 other people and not be with all 70 other people in your classroom or in your grade at that school site. So while some of it does seem like overkill, we thought that they were protective measures for the student so that it would give their advocates as much power as possible and leave as little ambiguity as possible in terms of what our true intentions were. We were coming at it from, the history of PUSD, and we don't want there to be any ambiguity about what the true intention of inclusion is. And again, we felt that these words were strong enough to make it clear, and hopefully once we get buy-in and we get several years of wind behind our back, we can look to remove some of these if necessary, but we felt it was necessary to protect the student at this point.
Jim.
We also spoke about this being an invitation to the table, to bring in as many people in the district who may not know. We kept saying around the table, we all get it. We understand what we're talking about here. We want to reach out to the people who may not have participated in inclusion. We want to reach across the table to our general ed friends and pull them in. So we wanted it to be an invitation as much as anything else.
Yes.
Why was the decision made to leave out IEPs? The last line was based upon IEPs, because quite frankly, people in general ed may not know what an IEP is, and also if we want to have a basis for the active delivery of support services and modifications, I almost think we need to include, based upon IEPs, et cetera. Everyone does not know what an IEP is.
Go right ahead.
Including some special education people I've learned, parents who have, I have met parents who have children in special education, and they've not necessarily in the PUSD, but they've not been advised of their children's rights and told about IEPs, et cetera.
Monica will respond.
First of all, IEPs are confidential, and you're not really supposed to. My hope is that you don't have to share them around. I mean, the concept should be something that everybody understands, but it shouldn't be something that, the student next to you knows and then tries to use that as an excuse to treat you differently. I mean, I wouldn't. My son hated that people knew he had some kind of special paper. But my other thing is that Maurice Morrissey, who used to be a big-time advocate in the district, used to teach a character education class to all students just to help them understand about, the differences between people and having good character. And that, I remember she wrote a letter before she died to the board asking that they bring such a course back, because it would help a lot of this, where people just don't understand that some people have different things that are more specific than other people. And if we wrote, I guess we could write the word IEP on here, but I think the reason that I think we didn't at the time was because we wanted everyone to be looked at as a separate, unique individual, not as somebody that is described on a paper. And I don't know, maybe that wasn't the right way to go about it. This was just our first time trying to do it, you know what I mean?
Hand here and then there.
Don't mean to rush you, I'm sorry. In all the documents I've ever seen in any models, and I've been to a lot of school districts in Southern California, and I've seen a lot of classrooms. The idea of an inclusive classroom is to help all children who need help, regardless of whether they have an IEP or not. So basically, if you put in this definition of inclusion an IEP, then it means that the child that maybe has some other need but doesn't qualify for an IEP does not get the same level, does not get the support that they need. So this definition of inclusion really talks about all kids getting what they need regardless of the reason that they need it. But it doesn't diminish the need for an IEP or the teacher's involvement and commitment to the IEP. And I think every teacher, general ed and special ed, knows what an IEP is, and it's really our responsibility as people in special education to make sure that the people, the teachers in inclusive settings know what is written on the IEP.
Basically, we did have Group 3, the group that I was a part of last time, did include with IEPs and without IEPs. But when it came to this part of the discussion, a couple things. The third sentence really is about IEPs without mentioning IEPs.
Right.
So it's about looking at a student as an individual, looking at their strengths and supporting their needs with modifications, adaptations, and supports. Really, that, in essence, is a layman's definition of IEP. The goal was that we were looking at it from both a special education perspective and a general education perspective, and we don't want inclusion to be viewed upon by a general education community as, oh, I'm doing them a favor. So by singling out and by adding special education or IEPs or any other terminology that's associated with special education, we felt that there could be a loss of buy-in, and ultimately for inclusion to work, you need just the opposite. You need absolute buy-in from the general education community, whether that's parents, students, teachers, administrators, what have you. So we felt that last sentence was a layman's definition of IEP, and gave the student every protection that he or she would need without calling attention to it in a way that could detract from a universal buy-in.
Being the dinosaur at this table, and having been there when Public Law 94-142 was passed, I totally agree with Louise. I believe that there is a serious need to include the IEP in this. Whatever you said sounded good. Anyway, because this is going to be a definition which is going to be out in the public, and I think it is critically important for folks to know that these services are provided based upon an individualized education plan. And I totally agree with her.
And I just want to chime in and, I'm sorry.
No,
Was
we need
somebody
to
else?
wrap up.
Oh, this is the last thing I was going to say. This is something that I personally have noticed since 2001 when we entered the district. There's an element of suggesting that the special education community not be identified. And I think there's strength and confidence that comes with our students when they become ambassadors for who they are. And so just like I could, never deny that I'm a female, well, maybe I could, but that I couldn't deny that I'm an African American, et cetera, my daughter has always been encouraged to acknowledge that she's a special education student and not shy away from that. And she has learned to advocate for herself and for other special education students in settings where they might be mistreated or discriminated against, et cetera. And so, I don't have a problem with adding IEP. I think it's imperative. As was said, if you leave that language out, we could sort of end up in a situation, and I'll wrap up with this, when the federal government gave a huge amount of money to banks thinking that they would take that money, I guess, and loan it to people who were having problems with their mortgages, and they elected to just hold on to that money and not do that. If we're going to put this definition out, I think we need to be succinct but specific, and I think IEP is the bedrock, and IEP is the bedrock of special education services.
I would like to say one more thing.
We need to wrap up.
All right.
When I said that Louise's comment would be the last, her comment was to be the last. We have to move on. Thank you, but we have to move on. We have the comments from the group. I've taken note of them. The group will get together immediately after the meeting, the subcommittee, identify a time when they can get together again, and again, take into consideration all those things that were shared this evening. You'll note the next item on the agenda, optimal educational environments, approach and support to maximize student achievement. There were some handouts that were provided to you. There's a list of high-performing schools and districts for students with disabilities dated September 12, 2011.
Yeah.
And I believe it was, the information was provided for us by, wait a minute, no. Yes, this is the study that Leonard said he had access to, or is this the one that you found, Mr. Costello? The Riverside County Office of Education?
That was me.
Okay. Why don't you just quickly highlight for us what you wanted us to take away from this particular handout?
Sure. In terms of looking at districts and schools that are, quote, doing it right, Leonard gave us the handout from Wested with the 4 schools, and I just wanted to see if there were any other examples out there that we could look at to flesh out our study and to try to come up with the most comprehensive solution possible. And so searching on the internet, that was one of the reports that I found. It was by Riverside County. It came out last year, and it lists schools and districts who have shown success in teaching students with disabilities in terms of the testing scores and such in both math and English individually and totally. So you can go, you can take that list. I took that list and compared student populations versus Pasadena, and there are several on there which, while they might not be district level, we can look at some schools, I think, to see what they're doing and see if that applies to ways we can make it better here.
Yes.
I just know specifically about my family's from San Bernardino. Etiwanda Elementary is a really kind of a sketchy location. I'm not sure. I've helped some parents with IEPs there, so I'm not sure about that. But what about Whittier? Because Whittier, I always find just tantalizingly fascinating in terms of inclusion and how they, use their aids, and way fewer, but use them in blending in between classrooms. And I was just...
There's quite a few here.
Was Whittier...
The Whittier district would be in Los Angeles County.
But they have several schools. Okay, so it's just by the whole district, that one. Mike?
No, this looks at all of California. So there are schools from Northern California, San Diego, LA as well.
But
so
I mean, some of them are district-wide and some of them are just school-wide.
The first two segments, I believe, are individual schools. The last section is districts.
It's excellent data.
Now the question is, what does the group want to do with the data? Remember, I asked the question, we were requesting quite a bit of data. What do we want to do with this information now that we have it? Mr. Huntley.
If it's okay, I'd like to address one thing about Whittier. I've actually been, thank you. I've been to the schools in Whittier, and one thing that they do is they actually separate their districts. They have a high school district, and they have is it a middle school and elementary school district? Do you know, Mr. McLaren? Because I know that they at least
there's Whittier Union.
Hey, there's one somebody.
There are 5 elementary school districts in Whittier and 1 Union High School district. If you look on the penultimate page here, there are 2 schools. There's Whittier High and California High are listed out of the Union High School district. I don't think Whittier is about 130,000 people. It's a little bit smaller than Pasadena.
Right.
And you have 5 school districts. I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah. I don't know if they'd ever consider that here.
And to answer your question, I think we need to review the data and decide how we want to use it. Because before the meeting actually started, we looked at the homework that was assigned to us, and I was a little suspicious of the data found here. It just seems to be, to me, incredulous. It's perfect, and if we compared ourselves to some of these findings, we should walk away with our heads down. And, I've just not had these kinds of experiences.
Yes, Jen.
I think the handout that was passed out is sort of overwhelming, and where would we even begin to start? I had the opportunity upon Dr. McDonald's encouraging to attend a meeting today entitled Closing the Achievement Gap for Students with Disabilities. And some of the schools, and the reason he was excited about it because it was actual people from the schools, from the districts presenting their data and providing us with the participants with information and very detailed, specific, actionable items that they took and tasked to close the achievement gap and to raise achievement for students with disabilities. I just rolled in from the workshop today, so I was there all day, as was another Pasadena staff person. We haven't even had a chance to really dig in, but I did want to say for the record that people that presented today were from Sanger Unified, so if you see that, Topaz Elementary from Placentia, Yorba Linda. Okay, so maybe I'm going to put this out there, Madam Facilitator. Maybe we want to do some subgroup work, take a look at this, dissect it. I'm not sure how you want to proceed. Fulton Middle from Fountain Valley, Folsom High School from Folsom, Cordova, Birch Elementary from Compton Unified, Washington Academic Middle from Sanger, and then Murrieta Valley Unified. And these districts were recruited by both AXA and a consultant to come and share with the participants how they did it, because they've had some pretty phenomenal results. Some of their demographics look different than ours, but I still think there's some key elements of learning that we perhaps could take away.
Well, there are some districts that absolutely, because of their performance, were selected to be representative and presenters. Would we like to just start with that sampling? I mean, it's a given sample already. We can just take a look at those first.
Too, because
which report are we talking about? Are we talking about the lessons from California districts showing unusually strong academic performance for students in special education? That was our homework, and that's what we read. And
well, you certainly wouldn't have the information that Jennifer just provided, because that was from a conference.
Well, Sanger is one of the districts that was discussed. This data is from is 4 consecutive years, ending in 2000 academic year 2007, 2008. Is that correct? And we looked at how the data was collected, what controls were in place, and we just had some questions, and quite, we had questions about what do they mean when they said special education or student with disabilities. There wasn't enough information about the groups that were studied. We didn't have enough data, and the outcomes just seemed really extreme. The studies were based upon an hour-long telephone discussion and
So interviews, basically.
with an administrator. Yeah, it didn't seem like a lot of due diligence, and so based upon this report, and quite honestly, I'm going to say they were looking, it suggested that the majority of the students in, I think it's California, special ed students get the CST. I don't know if that's necessarily the case in the PUSD. Also, we all know nationwide there are concerns about standardized tests, results. Atlanta and other places, we know that schools that have looked as if they were exemplary based upon standardized test scores, we discovered there was some cheating that took place. I'm not suggesting that that's the case, but I think what we need to do is review the data better.
Well, I was going to ask a question. Because you have information there that was basically self-reported.
Right.
And you have more objective data here. Would the group prefer to, with those issues that Ms. Bell brought to light, with those things in mind, would it be better for us to focus on the information that's provided by objective third party, and then again perhaps use those districts that were presenters at the conference that she attended today, or find additional districts, but simply go to a source that is not a self-reporting source?
Yes, I agree with that.
I would also like to suggest that we do have some interaction discussion with WACSEP. WACSEP is the Whittier Area Cooperative.
Yes.
And they were the original master plan district for special education, along with Santa Monica, and I don't know what other districts. But they have consistently done, I think, been held up as doing at least a decent job with special education. And I think it's something that might be of value to this task force to have a discussion with the leadership of WACSEP and just see how they do things. Those are the districts that are within Whittier. There's East Whittier, what else?
Whittier City, East Whittier, Whittier Union.
Yeah, there's what, 4?
Whittier
did you say?
ESD.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think it might be of value for us to take a look at something that has been upheld as exemplary for the last 30 years and is doing a good job.
Following that would have us really focusing our energy on one district.
Well, I'm not suggesting one district, but I just think a SELPA.
It's not. Okay.
Little Lake, East Whittier,
Right.
El Rancho, Los Diaz, it's a number of districts.
But
the sad part for me is all those districts unfortunately give me the shudders. They're all on my list for work.
What was that?
I'm sorry.
They're all what? I'm sorry.
They're all on my list for people I contact routinely. It's like, oh, flashback. Okay.
That doesn't mean that there's a conflict, though.
Oh, not at all. No.
May,
But my statement was, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, my statement was that because we are referring to them as having, a continuity in their best practices, that maybe that's, instead of looking at numerous right now, we focus on that particular group.
I just wanted to say something. Yes. I just wanted to say that my son, who's 23, who speaks now and didn't speak when he was younger and was considered low functioning, used a lot of the concepts that are used at Whittier with the supposedly low functioning, autistic kids, the ones that people think are never going to do anything. And they use a lot of assistive technology and a lot of different ways of doing things that is not, I'm going to tell you, you just don't find it, everywhere. Like, for instance, a lot of people assume assistive technology is just for those who can't speak, that everybody who has a particular disorder, their speech, if they can speak, represents their best form of communication, which is not necessarily true. You just have to look at Facebook and Steve Jobs and different other people that used other methods that were much better for them for communication. And I think as we get more deeper into other aspects of it, we might want to look at schools that use all those different forms in their classrooms, really for everyone, not just necessarily those who have a disability. And assistive technology is really becoming a big thing, cheaper, much cheaper, and much more effective way of communication and easier to use.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Because this was the document that was given to us to read, I did go through it, and the fact that's stated on here in the introduction that 84% of the school districts with sufficient students with disability are failing to meet AYP. I've heard leaders in this school district on our board actually say, almost write off the efforts because, well, everybody's failing. So I would hate for us to go down the path of ignoring some best practices, some of the things that I've read in here that jump out at me, that we could embrace and try to add to the culture of the district. And I think that was the purpose, to highlight and see school districts or schools and school districts that are doing something different. And I saw a couple things. The things that jump out at me are collaboration, you know, between special ed teachers and general ed teachers. I think that continuous assessment is something also that is, I think a lot of school districts are now doing, the RTI. We're not waiting for the end of the year to find out if a child's, you know, he's further behind. We're sort of testing him along the way. And I think the more we do that, maybe we will identify less. I mean, that's the whole purpose of RTI, identify less kids in special ed. I also saw a creative use of the psychologist at the, let me see, the profile 2 at Sanger. Right. I thought that was great. The psychologist would function as a quasi vice principal, serving on leadership teams, conducting walkthroughs, dealing with student behavior issues, serving as a backbone of the RTI process. So I know that at the school that I was the chair of the school psych council last year at Roosevelt, we used some of our designated monies to enhance and bring forth the school psychologist to play a bigger role at the school, because we only had the school psychologist there for partial, like 1 or 2 days, and we saw the benefit that having her there throughout the week would enhance the whole school in terms of having behavior plans in place for everybody. So I think if we are going to come up with some regulations, some things to embrace, to put on paper, it could be, for example, not limiting the role that somebody plays. I think there's a lot of that going on, probably not just in this school district, in public education in general. Somebody saying, oh, well, it stops here, what I'm doing. And then, well, the aides got, or whoever, they pick up because my job title doesn't go beyond this line. So you know, maybe we need to have lines expanded so that they overlap, so that we have a true, you know, for a culture of a school to really embrace all kids. You can't have people saying, well, that's your kid. Oh, that's my kid. No, it's everybody's kids. When everybody is participating in the education of a child and looking out for the best interest of that child, be it the janitor or be it the behavior aide or the person serving the food or whoever, when we all know the kids and we are looking out for their best interest, everybody wins. And so I think that as we look to define job titles through the Personnel Commission, whoever is defining the roles of people like a psychologist, that we look at expanding them, and so that we can do some of these best practices.
Thank you. 2 minutes, and then there's something that I need us to do.
I'm going to make it quick. Talking about the reading from last week, one thing that I found that was a common theme between all the exemplar districts was that it was collaboration and training. One of the biggest issues we have as educators, and this isn't just for for teachers, and I think it's administrators, I think it's problematic for parents too, is that we do have collaboration, we do have a lot of training, we go through a lot of training, but once we have the systems in place, a lot of the people who are leaving. I mean, and if we're going to be able to have if we're going to be able to have students close the achievement gap, we need to have faces stay. We need to be able to have people who are successful stay in the classroom or stay at the sites. And that's one thing that they didn't really go over in any of these articles, but no.
Very quickly, 1 minute, Louise.
I was just going to tie into that, actually. We got the pink slip notification information from the district today, and amongst the positions that are being eliminated are a lot of special education resources. So as he was saying, we've got faces leaving, we're losing resources. We've already lost, as part of prior task force, psychologists, and also a reduced extended school year. So I don't know if we can even come up with simulating any of these best practices because we keep losing vital resources.
Well, actually, what I was going to, 1 minute.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I saw through these, and I don't know how many of the districts were using it, explicit direct instruction. Maybe Dr. Anoya can address that, if that is a specific process or program. It looked as though like it was a program that was like a authored program. Explicit direct instruction.
Yes, you need the microphone.
Explicit direct instruction is a methodology that teachers are trained to deliver instruction.
Has our district trained teachers in explicit direct instruction?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was distracted for just a moment. What I wanted us to do this evening as a result of the homework is, 1, honoring the diversity of the group. 2, honoring that in our diversity there are certain areas that we hold more dear than others. I want us to break into groups, and I want you to list the best practices that you identified from your reading. The best practices that you identified from the reading that you believe make up an optimal setting. Now this is, and I'm going to ask you to go with me, this is optimal setting. No constraints, no restrictions. Optimal setting, no constraints, no restrictions. So you see I have Mr. Costello helping me out here, posting the chart paper. I'm going to break you into groups of 4. So we'll have approximately 5 groups. I'm sorry, it's funny.
Mike.
I'm going to break you into groups of 4.
Mike.
And in those groups of 4, again, you're going to identify those best practices that you believe would make up an optimal setting within PUSD. Now, you're probably thinking, oh my God, the list is going to be incredibly long. But the fact is, you're going to see repetition. That's what we're going to see. But those things that we see repeated, those are really the things that the task force as a whole believes should be present. Yes?
Before we do that, I just want to recalibrate a little bit. Comments that I've heard in the past few minutes have been kind of like, woe is me, the sky is falling, everybody's against us, there's no way we can succeed, and that is the exact, in my opinion, wrong stance we can be taking. We've been given an opportunity, we've been given the power to try to set a new course for this district, and more importantly, a new course for our students, our kids. And I think we have to grab that as hard as we can and not be blindsided by the past, and really look at what we need to do things right going forward. And so it's not about faces leaving or anything else. We have to acknowledge that there are obstacles to overcome, but we first have to know where the promised land is that we need to get to. And that's what I challenge all of us here tonight, is to really be bold, really be visionary, and put it out there. And let's not handicap ourselves before we have a chance to actually compete. And that would be my advice.
Sounds like words to inspire the entire group. Okay, we're going to start with Leonard, as being our number 1. I'd like for you to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, if you will. Joyce, are you going to participate? Okay.
4.
1, 2, 3.
I would like to participate as an observer since I didn't have an opportunity to read the material.
Okay, feel free to join any group. Or do as I do and just roam. I'm sorry, everyone. I have you counting off 1, 2, 3, 4. I needed you to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Facilitator faux pas. I know. Just get rid of me now. I can't count. All righty.
2,
3, 4, 5. 1,
2, 3, 4.
And we have parents in the back. Do they want to participate? I'm sorry, Mr. Costello. We have parents in the back. Would you like to participate? Sure. Okay. Feel free to just kind of, if you don't want, just go to any group. Okay. So my ones, I'd like you here in the front right. You all be happy to know my teaching credential is going to expire very soon, so I won't be in front of children. Group 2, I'd like there. In front, I just love that picture of the little girl over there. Number 3 is in the back. Number 4 is here, and group 5 is here. So remember your assignment. Your assignment is optimal environment.
I don't know what I said, so don't.
Okay, where's 3? I didn't pay attention. I'm listening to Susan. Must be 1, 2.
We're
Where's 3?
we're 2, right? Okay.
2.
Again. Oh, that's like deja vu.
I'm assuming 1, 2, 3.
This is kind of freaky.
Spooky. Don't take it personal.
Are you a 2?
I'm a 2.
You're a 2. That's for That's, you know what? Watch this.
There aren't that many of us in here, so.
That's right. We're a smaller group.
Well, they are 1, 2, they're 4.
Okay, so just 4.
Yeah.
There are 5
Short
groups.
a few people.
4 is this one.
So maybe 20 people in here. And some people just wanted to observe.
Okay, group 1, raise your hand. Group 2, raise your hand.
I did too.
Group 3. Group 4, raise your hand. And group 5. There we go.
Some of these parents say they want to.
They want to observe. You should definitely have an idea about best practices.
But you know, my goal is always to listen because I want to hear. I want to hear what the perceptions and needs are.
Okay. So
What I will tell you is there are a couple things that stood out in this article for me. One is on page 7.
Which is the page
which
I'm
is
on.
where you look at the percent of special education students in the district, and then the percentage of English learners. And then there were the elements that I liked is that they asked each of the directors of special ed to give 3 elements that had helped them, improve scores that they felt were the most important. So they said, what 3 things did you think were the most important? And like on page 8 is the Kerman list, the bulleted numbers down about on the bottom. And then you have I think it's the Sanger, is then on page 10 with the 3 bullets. And then San Bernardino with Kepler are on the top of page 12. And then 13. And then all of those are summarized. Let me remember where they were summarized.
At the end of the document.
Well, at the end of the document, but then also an emphasis on curriculum alignment with curricular frameworks.
Keep your eye on the clock at 10 minutes to 8, we're going to do a process check.
The number 1 there for me is an emphasis on curriculum alignment with curricular frameworks, so that no matter where a child is on a continuum of special education services, there's a pacing plan for alignment to the standards, so that when we start to talk about mainstreaming or inclusion, those kids have an expectation or realization to go back into the educational setting and participate because they're in the same place. They're learning the same skills. They're reading the same stories. Are they modified? Yes. Are they structured differently? Yes. For access? Yes. But you have those same basic elements being done. And you'll notice number 2 there is on page 5, effective systems to support curriculum alignment. Emphasis on inclusion and access to the curriculum. And for me, when we always go back to curriculum, it's something that's non-moving. It's something that we can all, it's in the state standards. So it's a very easy conversation for us to have because it's not a moving target, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The other bullet that struck my mind here was use of student assessment data to inform decision making. Not anecdotal conversation at the IEP, but what data did you collect? Let me see the 1s and 0s. Let me see the 1s and 2s. Okay, and then the other one is effective staff leadership, retention, and deployment.
Which was the negative thing I just mentioned, but it's true.
But there are ways to do these things, even in hard times. There are ways to do these flexible leaders and staff that work effectively in a dynamic environment and effective leadership.
I don't recall anything on here about parents, though.
Well, remember, this is a study by the school.
I understand.
This is by schools for what did directors do to implement. And so it's really based on, it's from a special education director standpoint.
I understand.
Not an inclusive community. But what I will tell you is, right here,
page what?
Page 5. That's where I read all of it. Emphasis on inclusion in curriculum.
And access to the curriculum.
And those are the elements I think
what we were talking about last time we read that access to was
and I think access to, I guess you want me to write?
Oh, no, I'll write.
Right, okay. I always forget to.
So,
I think it's access to the curriculum. Because that's something for any child. And so if you have a target that doesn't move, you have accountability, I think.
I think we need to add use of student assessment data to inform decision making. Because
and some of the things that rub me the wrong way were things like that, like comparison, let's find things, like state school standards. So the stuff like that, I'm like test scores and results and stuff like that. I just think that it's time just to
I,
mean, like that kind of, I think that kind of thinking in a way restricts, you know, like you're almost thinking like, okay, so there's a standard that's been set based on previous slavery performance during this particular testing period or whatever, right?
it's based upon the state standard, though.
Yeah, the state standard is bullshit.
Well,
But they may be, but at this point, under these guidelines, our kids.
This is like, we're supposed to look like our utopian, right?
Right.
That's what we're going after, so it doesn't matter.
But can we get away from data? Can we get away from looking at the data?
Well, we can, but because this is in a perfect world, whatever we want.
I need you to put the bullets out there because I can't think.
What? Yeah.
Collaboration amongst what?
All stakeholders. That's one of the stakeholders, yes, because that's one of the elements in. That was the example of the special education teacher who was made a part of the leadership team at the school. And to highlight your point, there's no reason why we couldn't say parent involvement.
You gotta have.
You know,
yeah.
and I think that's what this is.
But I think a lot of times that word per se almost seems taboo. That's been my observation when you parent.
You know, when I hear you say that, I think it's important that the way it's phrased indicates that parent involvement representation is not optional.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And it's really, in my opinion, a bedrock. It's essential. In my opinion, education starts at home from birth. So, but I all too often when we're having discussions about student achievement, I don't hear the role of parent mentioned. It's as if the kid is only, the school has the sole responsibility for student achievement.
Well, remember what should happen in the IEP.
Right, exactly.
Is we should be starting with what are the strengths, you know, and goals you have. What are the strengths you see?
Right.
What are you seeing at home? That should be a place where we're starting the meeting.
Exactly. I concur.
So in an optimal environment, I mean, I think this body here, we have parent involvement. We have parents making recommendations to. But think about it, it's a starting point. I mean, you know, there are a lot of districts where this kind of committee, it wouldn't exist.
And we're also talking about going forward because, quite frankly, the past is behind us. We have to, and we're involved here.
Past is a bucket
so
of ashes.
we're involved here. So we just have to make certain, you know, in best practices, maybe we note the significance of parent involvement.
Parent involvement.
Yeah, I think it needs to be specific. I have to honestly say, it seems as if I mention parent, you know, responsibilities of parent, it's almost as if it's taboo. Don't say that. Don't say that.
What I will tell you.
No. That's been my observation.
But that's the past. The article
I'm just
that
telling
I
you
keep,
what my experience has been.
The article about inclusion.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you
people
live in
won't
that
use
past,
that language,
if you live in that past, you will stay in that past.
Well, that's why I'm saying for what we're talking about best practices, I would like to see some kind of mention of
parent involvement.
Yeah.
The article that I keep giving everybody on inclusion, when I'm just talking amongst my staff and things, is from the Wisconsin Education Association. And it says the number one recommendation we have is that districts move forward in a collaborative partnership with parents, special ed, and general education staff to you know, so that so that everybody's on the same page, there's clear understanding, and there's vision.
So
Because they said
instead of saying all
otherwise,
stakeholders, maybe we could break that down, because I might think all stakeholders are A, B, C, and you might think they're X, Y, Z. So maybe we should break down who the
there are
stakeholders
districts where
are.
it's the superintendent's vision.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can name a couple.
And so maybe you could share again what the language was with the Wisconsin
It's,
version.
well, I think we can do it right here. Just
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Say it out loud.
collaboration of all stakeholders.
Semicolon.
Full inclusion of students with disabilities.
I say it again.
Would access to curriculum be like full inclusion of students with disabilities?
It's access to curriculum is going to happen across the full continuum of the special education stream. So you're going to have it in an SDC class. You're going to have it in a full, in an inclusion setting. You're going to have it in an RSP, for students getting RSP services. You're going to have it in a kid who's at a school like mine. You're going to have access to the curriculum across that continuum of service. So that's going to be something that happens in all levels of that continuum of service.
I have a question though. Were we supposed to be pulling out information from this report?
Yes.
Okay, so
He asked a clarifying question.
Okay.
Yeah, but also our own, plus our own ideas, even if it wasn't included in the report, right? That's what I.
Yeah, we're supposed to talk about what's our optimal environment. What are we
Well,
going to have?
I think then we need to add some of the information from the inclusion verbiage that we've gotten up to this point, because we talked about social, the students being involved socially.
In an optimal environment, when a team sits down, they're going to talk about every range of service, every setting available to a child, and then discuss what will meet the child's needs, what's appropriate to meet the child's needs. And that's a discussion sometimes I think, and not necessarily in Pasadena, but where I came from, that conversation could always take place. So that it was, a conversation of parents, teachers.
Let's start off with students, because I think we should start with students. Board. The Board of Education, you can't leave them out. If you leave them out, then we don't have any real accountability. You
make sure you
put
have two
administration
teachers.
on there too with the list you were making.
General education teachers and special education teachers. Both of them.
Add administration to that group there. Well, we want you to do. Because you got to be empowered, quite frankly. You're the delivery system.
I was going to ask you, should we put here next to our definition of inclusion, although it's ever changing?
Well, but with that, then we did talk about the socialization of our students. Right there, they need more than just access to the curriculum, because they need.
Well, here, if you look on page.
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting social.
Here's what they call it.
Okay, a well-disciplined academic and social environment. So access to curriculum and social environment.
Yeah, I see access to curriculum, a well-disciplined academic and social environment.
Well, that's what it means, i.e.
That's what they call it.
Okay. Because he doesn't want us to be part of that 12-step program.
And on. There you go.
Well, if you said access to curriculum and academic social setting or whatever, because quite often our kids do get left out of student government and so many of the other clubs, etc.
We have 2 minutes until a process check. 2 minutes until a process check.
Yeah.
2 minutes until a process check.
I'm going to say social settings and empowerment settings, because learning to be on, you know, if you learn to be in the student government, then you're also learning how to advocate, perhaps take that further as an adult and advocate, or as a student, advocate for not only students with special education or whatever you feel like you want to advocate for. So I don't know if that's necessarily just a social setting. What do you think?
Give me more.
Well, you know, student government, a lot of people learn to advocate by being in student government. A lot of our students are not represented. Right now, I'm advocating for each campus to have representation on student government by special education students, because that's generally, a lot of it's a popularity contest, and our kids don't get on those organizations. Yeah, so I'm almost thinking they should be appointed.
If I can get your attention. Your attention, please. If you're not writing, I need you to look at me. If you're not writing, I need you to look at me. Are there any groups that need more time? Are a little more time? Okay. If there's a group that believes that they're done, I'm going to ask you to just go ahead, go on a break. Otherwise, we're going to devote 10 more minutes to the activity. 10 more minutes. So if you're having trouble identifying things, use your source document.
Resources for delivery of curriculum, resources for students. Usually when we talk about usually when you talk about that, you talk about a defined continuum of special education services. I mean, that would be key, is you have a defined continuum of special education services so that you can maximize resources. That's why SELF is formed. It's the whole reason SELF is formed. And for me, for an optimal environment, you have to have it. You have to have a continuum, a clearly defined continuum. All spellings are originally correct.
M, put an M there.
M. Of special education service.
I think it should be a UIM, but whatever.
Hey, all spellings are originally correct.
That's right. Of special ed services, is that where it leads? Ends right there, a clearly defined continuum of special ed services. Okay.
I think in an optimal environment, you have a clear understanding of the IEP process, and all participants have equal voice.
I think we need to say something about collaboration of all stakeholders. Students, I guess under that definition, it wouldn't just be special education students, but the student population at large. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And that's in a clearly defined continuum of special education services. That's what, well, we can do like a sub-bullet saying that resources are, you know, utilized.
Effectively and efficiently.
And see, when you do have a clearly defined continuum of services, you pull areas, So if you have deaf, hard of hearing, you don't spread them. You put them in one place. You center your service so that you don't have people driving. My old district, we had people drive and we pay lots of mileage. There's just no way around that.
Do we want to, do we? Oh, of course, I own it.
So, I'm thinking,
But it talked about a lot of things, so specifically.
that guy started the KIP program and everything, like, it was an unrestricted,
What guy started the KIP? Is it the KIP program, or is it, are you speaking about, the guy Jeffrey, what's his name?
Yeah, I think his name is Jeffrey.
Yeah, that's New York, but I didn't know that was a KIP program.
Yeah.
That was the first one.
And they would go in and they'd have open. Didn't they do it at Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, where they had the, yeah, right.
They'd have
It might have been the garden. But I'm just trying to think of, like, you had a word, like, essentially thinking outside of the box, but having, like, every classroom, every environment in the classroom, not being restricted or constrained by.
I think we should add up there having high expectations.
Yeah, like,
Cause,
more than, like,
right.
having having unlimited expectations.
Well, but
Like that, word,
but when you say unlimited, that's great. But I think if you say, if the entire atmosphere on campus is that all of the students are expected, to have, high expectations, not only academically, socially, etc. Yeah.
Well, all students can achieve. At every level of the continuum, there has to be an expectation that every child can achieve and can
I think we
move
need
up.
to add something like that up there.
You are my interpreter. So I use my own term. So how about environment is highly interactive, highly dynamic?
Okay. Well, no, that's what you want. You want a Those are, when we talk about best practices in teaching, we're talking about high engagement, multiple.
What is it? Cross
modality.
When you're
cross modality learning.
Yeah.
What you really want is you want multiple opportunities to engage students.
Right. Yeah.
So you want to be able to give kids visuals. You want to be able to give kids auditory input. You want to be able to give kids kinesthetic. It's what you're really looking at is teachers engage in best practices for providing multiple modalities.
10-minute break. Everyone needs to report back by 8:10. 8:10.
The single most effective strategy for teachers.
If your group has already wrapped up, start your break. Everyone needs to return to the room by 8:10.
Are we defining the word with itself? Because didn't she say she wants us to put together best practices? So if we say best practices, that's not
for curriculum delivery. Multiple modalities, research days. The number one thing you can do is greet kids at the door. Next thing you can do is teachers engaging in best practices.
Is that unlimited for curriculum?
Well, you want best practices. You want them to have. What you want teachers to be able to do is engage in best practices. You want them to provide multiple modalities, and research-based strategies.
What is the research strategy?
Research-based strategies are things like greeting students at the door, giving students there are incentives, there are expectations, posted standards. There you go, that works.
We got to throw fun in there someplace too. We got to throw fun in there someplace too, because I mean honestly, because kids want the stuff to be delivered in a way that they enjoy. But
hands-on learning.
I think it's got to be delivered in a way that is fun and they don't realize teaching is taking place. Because you know how kids often think things are boring and so they sort of shut down. Pardon me?
Break?
No, that doesn't mean
that. Well, you've only got until 8:10.
Gentlemen, I need to step out for a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
8:10 is group startup time.
It was nice to meet you as well.
Should be aimed at general ed as well as special ed. It should be aimed at everyone. So the general ed teachers get some special ed training.
The frequency?
Yeah. And even, vice versa, I suppose.
I want you to tell me the child has
Yeah. I don't know who you're talking about.
I want that. Because what happens is
I don't get confused kids. I don't teach that type of kids. see. Let me see. What the marks? Oh, no. Oh, let me think. Who do I see? Best practices, optimal setting, environment. Could it be? I don't know. It was sitting right there. Oh, yeah, I was thinking the gentleman. Yeah, okay. I'll check with him when he comes back in.
So did you get your stuff selected? Oh, well, that is a good thing. Claire Rubenstein that used to work at Noise, got her degree.
But this is the woman who does, who teaches, comes in But, you know, just a few phone calls and got the right people. And they said, oh, no problem. We have lots of history books. Not the day God.
I know a lady at JPL which she does exercises or demonstrations for
Well, so did Blair.
people with bad
And then
sight.
she went to Loyola.
She's got tactile
And then she
skates,
got her master's degree.
things like that.
Well,
Lots
first of all, she
models
got her
that brings
education
in, stuff
degree,
like that.
and then she got her special ed credential.
No. She's now
And then she
a
left
lady.
here and went to
She
Beverly
works on a Cassini project, which is flying around Saturn taking pictures at the moment.
Right. A lot of people come and miss out on the fun after 1 year.
I could just email her for you. I know who she is and say.
So it's only for kids with,
She just does public outreach. She could do. She goes to schools to talk. Yeah. NASA pays. Her job is education, public outreach.
That would be criminal justice
That's her
degree.
job. So she'll come in, she'll come to a school. I even know her through star nights, like stargazing things. But you know, I've seen her with not just some special needs kids I can see, but they enjoy feeling stuff.
Are you from California?
Printouts were amazing, and she was getting them to put paper over and then do rubbings of them, so nice proprioceptive input and keeping them calm. She knows all this sort of stuff. And
What was your uncle's name? Mike. How long ago was that? I don't remember that name. I don't remember that name. I follow politics closely. I don't remember that name.
No, I don't ever remember that name. As a city council member, oh, he worked for the city.
Oh.
I'm okay, how are you?
Back to your seats. Everyone, back to your seats. Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
I can believe that.
Everyone, back to your seats.
That was during the boom period, I think, partially anyway.
Do you have that paper?
Trust me, you'll have
It's right here.
when you come in.
Jim, is this yours? Did you make those notations on there?
That's not mine.
Everyone, back to your seats, please. We need to get started.
Mike.
Mr. Smart and
Is that yours? I give up. I don't know whose it is. It's not.
Okay.
not a major issue.
Thank you. All righty, this is what we want to do. I want a representative from each group to just simply read through, please. No commentary, no editorial. simply read through the items. Yeah. Like, I'll have to do something. Simply read through those things that your group listed as optimal environment. This is one of those places where it will sound as though I'm rude and I'll cut you off, okay? Because we've got a short amount of time and we have been waiting for the budget review. Yes, because I'm going to give you some instructions on the prioritizing the recommendations, but I want to make certain that we do the budget review tonight. So I'll do the prioritizing recommendations after the quick budget information review. And you now have the floor, Joyce.
Oh, right now?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, look at you. Even I want to get to it. I can't wait. No. So a member from each group, again, you're just going to read through what your group wrote. Thank you, Mr. Skip, for going first.
I was just walking over. Do I need a microphone?
You can have mine. There you are. You stick your shirt. Careful not to trip on the cord.
I'll just hold the microphone. Okay, so without any editorial, number one, these aren't prioritised, by the way. They're not. They're just the order we found things in. So flexibility in teaching methods. Teachers need to be allowed to be flexible, backed up with appropriate resources and also supports with assisted technology, for example. Number two is make sure all students are held to the same high standards. Number three was collaboration between staff. Make sure staff are given the time to collaborate. And I've put this is particularly important for transitions. Number four is reduced class sizes. 5 was parent education with general ed and special ed aspects for that parent education. In a model like the GATE and English Learner programs. Professional development and make sure there's good retention of staff and stability within the district, the organisation of the district. Make sure that there's ongoing training and special ed and general ed aspects of training for all staff. We've put paraprofessionals in every classroom. That would be ideal. We suggested music teachers and art teachers to come in, more emphasis on those programs. Specific planning time for teachers for lesson preparation, and better community connections so that families have more information about what's out in the community, things that aren't necessarily related to the school. That's everything.
Thank you.
So group 5, this was our list. General ed and special ed teachers collaborate regularly and often. Continuous assessment in real time of how the student's doing. Access to core curriculum. The proper support, the study showed, properly supported equaled success, but the lack of support equaled failure in terms of the classroom. High expectations for all, the belief that all can achieve. RTI, targeted professional development, use of explicit direct instruction, learning centers, a year-to-year transition plan, and by that we mean the exiting teacher or the teacher that had the student talks to the teacher that's receiving the student. District-wide culture, it has to be a district-wide culture as opposed to having isolated communities within the district. Early intervention, so regional center transition at the age of 3 or search and serve, but really supporting the student at the earliest possible state. Read 180, Read Well, DIBELS, basically just specialized reading programs. An inclusion environment, generally speaking, has to be a stated board priority. They set the tone, and it has to be a stated superintendent priority, and even to the extent that the superintendent, one of his or her performance review criteria is based upon the academic achievement. And I would add, listening to Warren's group, parent involvement. Certainly parent education is good, but parent involvement as well.
El ambiente ideal, no, I'm kidding. I'm teasing.
Where's your translator?
In our ideal environment, we would have a school-wide culture of a shared community. Everybody would be responsible for all the kids. General ed, general and special ed, regular collaboration. And that would include the staff, all the aides, and everyone. Sometimes teachers go on to IEPs, and the common denominator in the classroom is that the aide or the assistant in the class. So it's good for them to translate that to the substitute. Flexibility, every child's needs are individually addressed. Having the ability to be flexible is super important. Systematic methods of assessing growth, curriculum, then modified on the basis of those results. So again, I think that's almost falls under the RTI and just always having a way of seeing where the student is and then adjusting along the way. An explicit education of all community members in the joys and challenges of diversity. Shared life experience is a good thing. We talked about differential pay. There's, why would somebody want to be a special ed teacher today? Why are there so many leaving? Why would somebody want to have extra duties if the pay is not, if we're not doing anything to attract someone that's willing to do a more difficult job? And I know it's a contentious issue, but it is. I know a few years ago when the CTA was surveyed, 70% of those surveyed on at the state, the teachers said that they agreed special ed teachers that had more difficult kids should make more monies. Differentiated instruction with ongoing professional development. Parents and other community members add a great deal to every part of the program. The true belief that all children can learn. So again, we thought if you already have somebody coming in from LACO or wherever to train teachers, add a few chairs, let parents sit in on some of these trainings.
Oh, was it? Were you signaling?
He didn't notice.
Alrighty, for our group, we have high expectations for all students, differentiation, accountability for instruction, scaffolding, data-driven decision-making, heavier, more amount of data collection, guided language acquisition design. Glad that was one of the topics that was actually discussed in one of the articles. Step up to writing, curriculum mapping, and common assessments as well. Talking about with RTI, explicit direct instruction, as well as the PLCs, but more within the focus on student learning and as well as collaboration. Looking at a variety of different reading curriculums, some of the examples we were thinking of like Wilson Reading or the Orton Gillingham. Professional development, going really into with our general ed teachers, is willing to, it's really, we do a lot of professional development, but it was more of the follow-up and the monitoring is where we really have to concentrate in that area. And really looking on how to instruct a variety of learning uniqueness, including as well as within our para-educators to be involved in that professional development. We even brought up some discussions of looking at learning centers at each different campus for all students, looking about different needing of their support, really looking at early interventions such as Read Naturally, Read 180, and I think one of the other big areas we're looking at is continuous progress monitoring, which could be running records, pre-test, post-test, DIBELS. AIMSweb is another program that we've heard of, and I think that was it. Yep, that's all of them. Who's next? Try to go fast.
Last but certainly not least.
Oh, there you go.
That's me.
All right.
We okay? Okay, we had access to curriculum, academic and social settings, collaboration of all stakeholders, including the students, the parents, the teachers, Board of Education. Yeah, right, that's going to happen. A clearly defined continuum of special education services, resources utilized efficiently, teachers engaging in best practices, unlimited expectations for achievement, obviously different for each class, multiple modalities, personal research-based incentives, student data-driven. A lot of these are the same things, just worded differently, and teaching teachers how to teach, sharing best practices. Is that it?
That's
That
it.
was the last?
Thank you. This is what's going to happen with what you provided. These will be turned into one list. The duplications obviously will be removed, but we now have what the task force believes to be an optimal environment. It may seem like it was an incredibly simple activity, but it should have been with all the conversations that you've had and the information you've had the opportunity to review and actually looking at districts that have some best practices. It should be a little easier to say, this is what we would like to have, again, in the best possible circumstances. All righty? And now, Joyce. Fanfare.
Good evening. Okay, before I go into my budget discussion, am I the only one who doesn't know what RTI is in this room? I am? So what does that mean? RTI. Okay, so that's my little self-introduction. I'm the budget person, so that's why I don't know what RTI means, but now I know I learned something. Does everyone have this little 2-page thing? It says Task Force meeting March 7, 2012. Okay, as much as I want to take credit of creating this slides just for this task meeting, I can't. This actually is a shorter version of a PowerPoint presentation by Dr. Papalardo and Dr. Blanco in last October to the Finance Subcommittee meeting. I think the topic is the special education study. So this is a shorter version. I think in that study it's more comprehensive. It has administrative and the programmatic section. And this couple slides are strictly budget. I think a couple weeks ago, Leonard and I, as we tried to prepare this little budget presentation, and we met with John, and so he provided me with this document. Of course, when he developed this PowerPoint slides, I provided input and information, all that, but Actually, after every meeting, I brief him about what we have discussed in this meeting. So he suggested that we use this study, but with a shorter version. So the second slide's about the budget projections. A lot of people they don't understand the difference between the forecast and the projection. So, at one point we would come out with one set of number, and maybe 2 months later or even a week later, we would change that. And people wonder why. Are you crazy? Are you just hiding some numbers? Are you making mistake? But actually, the reason is it's a projection. It's not a forecast. So we do use trends. We use historical data. We run scenarios. But the budget is really developed based on a set of assumptions. So it's very different from the forecast. And what are those assumptions? They're at different level. There's the federal and the state and local level. So what we're going to those assumptions? For instance, like COLA, cost of living adjustment. Those numbers are given by the state at the beginning of the year, and also deficit factor. Those are the assumptions we're going to use in our budget development. And what other assumptions? Locally, if we negotiate with the union, we are able to put in 5 furlough days. We're going to put in there. But if those 5 furlough days is going to phase out, we're going to put in there and say, in such and such a year, the furlough days go out. So those are the assumptions we put into the budget. So of course, you can see since 2008, 2009, our state has been in this kind of downward trend. So the budget is very volatile. As I can see from now, we have actually get through 3 hurdles. First, it's May revision. That's every year in May, the governor is going to come out and then say what's going to, in this current year, 2011-12, can he keep the promise, And that's May revision. And then, of course, in June, hopefully, by July, we're going to have the state budget. Last year, it was very, very late. And that's the second hurdle. And the next one, I think it's the biggie, and everybody probably knows about it, better vote, is the November election, because we don't know whether the tax initiative will pass. If it doesn't pass, we're going to know very soon. So I can see, in the foreseeing future, there are 3 hurdles we have to get through. So that's the budget projection, and then that's why it's so volatile. Any question? Yes?
Were the triggers factored into those projections, the triggers that were announced by Governor Brown in, I guess it was February, where he announced definite cuts because
well,
state revenue wasn't met, I guess, or
right.
the optimistic scenarios for projections weren't kept by the state.
Right. In the first interim report, we did not have any of those. But for the second interim report, we did include all the mid-year trigger that right now it's pretty much known for to be included in our second interim report. So in a day or two, we're going to post the second interim report on the website, and it's going to be presented to the board for their certification on next board meeting. So that will be 13. And then at that time, the board, because I used to work at the county level, LACO, so I'm a kind of a stickler to the terms. So a lot of people, they kind of use that a lot of terms interchangeably, but at the county level, we are very specific. So for the first June budget, it's always we adopt the budget. But for the first and second interim report, the board is going to certify whether we're going to be solvent for current year and the next 2 years. And then on the annual audit report, it's auditor's report. So they cannot approve, they can only accept the auditor's report because that's a report from another entity. So in other words, the second interim report, only after the board certified, that can be our official report. So you can probably Friday get on this our website and will be posted, but the board was going to vote on next Tuesday to whether they're going to certify our report or not.
I had a couple of questions. On your second page, when you talk about budget projections, I wanted to know if your base AB 602, are you referring to your mental health?
Oh, can I get to that?
Oh,
and
I
then
thought you had already done that. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just still talking about the. Okay. Okay, I'll move faster.
I'm sorry.
Yes. The first interim report, the cutoff is October 31st, but actually it was certified by the board on December 13th. That's first interim report. Now we are in the second interim report phase. So the cutoff is January 31st, and we revised the budget and, put in the actual today and project the totals at the year end, and then we're going to present to the board on next Tuesday.
So what did the board vote on last night?
The board on last night is it's a special board meeting. It's about the layoff resolution. I think that's the agenda. You can probably go to the website to see the agenda. It's a special board meeting, but it's not for the second interim report. Okay, let's turn the page and let's go into specific 2011 and 12. What's different is actually the special ed hasn't really suffered that much, from the state, at the state level. That in the past couple years, they did not give us negative COLA, actually. The revenue limit on the unrestricted side in 2010-11, we have a negative 0.25 COLA, negative COLA, but special ed did not get the negative COLA. And one big thing is the AB 3632. It's for the mental health. In the past, the county mental health department handle all that. They come to the IEP, and then they say the service, and then they pay for it. But now it's all landed on our lap. We get some funding from the federal, from the state, but it's our responsibility. So, in most of the cases, I think as far as I can see, it will create some encroachment. Maybe not in the beginning, in the first couple years, but down the road, we might still have encroachment in that area. But before, we don't get to see the revenue and we don't pay the expenditure. But now it's our responsibility. And of course, ARRA, the federal money, now it's gone. We received our first dollar in 2008-9. In 2019, 10-11, we spent majority of it, and then the very last $20,000, $30,000 was spent in summer. So the cutoff is September 30th. You have to spend all your ARA funds, and we have done that. Yes.
Could you just explain what that is for individuals who might be listening and don't know?
Okay.
funds are?
ARA funds, it's a stimulus package that provided by the federal government, and usually it come in the special ed area and also in Title I, and we also have some unrestricted. It's called SFSF. It's stabilization fund. So basically, we receive more than, I think, close to $20 million in the past 3 years, and we have to spend all of them. And for special ed, it's probably in the ballpark of $7 million, and we spend that in 3 years. And half of that can be used to help with the deficit encroachment, but at least 50% has to be new expenditure. Yes.
I have a question. Wasn't most of that money spent on RTI, not on special ed? And then when you say that it was used to impact the maintenance of effort or the encroachment number,
right?
Did the regulation that required the encroachment or the maintenance of effort number to, of course, go somewhat up annually? Did they hold off on that regulation for a while because of the fact that you received additional funds?
Yes, I think it's a complicated formula, and you have a different test. If you don't pass this test, per pupil spending, at least you have to spend a certain amount, fixed dollar amount, or you have to maintain the per pupil spending. But so far, we have passed all the tests.
And do we use the first, second, or third? Which test do we use?
I think we passed both, because first they test whether you have spent at the same level. The expenditure is at the same level. But if you're not, then they test whether you spend per pupil, because you have the declining enrollment sometimes. Exactly. Yeah, so I think we used the first test and we passed, and we did not have to go to the second testing.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to the budget projection. This slide, next slide. I want to touch on the special ed state apportionment, because it's, again, special ed funding is a very complex model. It has a lot of elements, and the first one is AB 602. It's a rate, and use that rate. It's about $690 for our district, and times your ADA. It's not just the special ed ADA, it's the entire district ADA. But if you have a charter school and then they use your service, you include that charter school ADA as well. But because the state has that hold harmless provision, usually if you're declining enrollment, then they will test the current year ADA versus last year, and with the special ed, they even have the 1 year before that. So the hold harmless this provision really help the district in the when your enrollment is declining. At least you can prep for it. You know next year you're gonna get less money, but you know how to maybe make some adjustment in your budget, in your spending pattern, and then hopefully you can get through that. And another one that we have been getting, and it's a big chunk, like a $2.2 million. It's a special disability adjustment. Unfortunately, it was phased out. So last year, 2010-11 was the last year that we received that funding. So it's really hurting.
Just a clarifying question.
Mm-hmm.
Hold harmless. Is
right.
It now over? Did that sunset, the whole harmless piece?
It's not. It's a loose term about hold harmless. Actually, they use hold harmless in the out-of-home care. But actually, what they're saying is, if you are declining, you have 18,000 last year, but you have 17,500 this year, you know, they're gonna fund you at 18,000, even though you're only serving 17,500. So that's what this. It's not only the special ed AB 602 funding, but also our revenue limit.
Don't they go back a couple years, not just 1 year, right?
Yes, special ed will go one more year to look at, to compare your ADA. And then because we are declining, especially this year, Avison pulled out, so we will see the reduction in our AB 602 funding in next year. Because of Avison pulled out, they have close to 600 ADA that we have received until they pulled out to provide services. But next year, that almost 600 drop will hit us. And another one is COLA. We haven't seen COLA for a long time, but hopefully in the future we will. And the growth. Growth is also connected to your enrollment, your ADA, because we are declining. They do give us a little negative adjustment. It's called the negative growth. So if you are you have more students coming in, you will get the positive growth, but if you're declining, they do take away some money, but it's not as, the impact is not as severe as they use the declining enrollment to calculate. This is a kind of adjusted growth. If you're negative, if you're declining, you will lose a little money, but but not that much. And another one is a program specialist or regionalized services. Again, it's a rate times your ADA, but the rate, of course, is lower. And low incidence, that one is directly based on your low incidence number. So ours is about 80, something like that. So it's a little help. But out of home care, that's something we really got very excited over the second interim, because second interim is based on the P1 certification at CDE. P1, the CDE certify, they collect all the data and they certify your funding level. And out of home care, in second interim report, we pick up about $1.4 million. Because the data is passed on to CDE from the Department of Social Services, and we don't know why all of a sudden that we pick up this funding. Of course, we will never say no, but but it also makes us wonder whether they have made a mistake in the past 2-3 years, because it's not really about the services, how many people signed up, beds, but it's about capacity. So I just don't see that our capacity will fluctuate so much in the past 2-3 years. So after we get through the second interim, interim report, I do want to go back to find the source and maybe somehow talk to the Department of Social Services. If they made the mistake for the past 2-3 years, we want the money back. You know.
She means beds. We're meaning like with an LCIs, your licensed children institutes, your foster homes. It's those types of things. So it's really looking. It's not based on how many students are there or how many missing beds. It's like how many possible. So if a group home has up to 10 beds, that's how they're calculating it. So that's why we're questioning.
Right.
Sometimes they're not full, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether
it
they're
doesn't
full
matter.
or not. It's
So
how
they
many
look
beds
at
there are
capacity.
available. It could be even if there's more group homes and they'd be counted as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do they, so they just base it off how many the group home is licensed for, or LCI is licensed for, can hold?
It varies.
Right.
And then we get funding based on how many
Beds.
Beds. Mm-hmm.
It's number of beds.
Yeah. Yes.
Haven't we been receiving that funding for many years?
Yes. And I saw kind of going down for the past 2-3 years. And we kind of wonder why. But now when it come back up, then now I said, oh, I need to go back, and maybe that there was a mistake made at the Department of Social Services. I don't know, but right now the number just came out, and then I'll try to find a contact person and say, where did you get the number? What happened?
What's the increase amount? 1 million?
1.4. That's a really big jump.
And then also, now, is this considered health care of some sort?
No, it's a part of our
Department of
special
Social
ed fund.
Services?
Part of our funding.
Part of funding, we can use that for special education.
Okay, but it has nothing to do
It has nothing, yeah.
health care?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. I just mentioned that Everson pulled out and loss of 1,000 per ADA because our rate is a 690, but another 300. It's when they were with us, we have encroachment in the special ed, so they also help. When we calculate our encroachment, say it's a 300 per ADA, we bill them and say we need you also to contribute. So that's why I calculate about the 1,000 revenue loss. Part of it, we're going to see that this year because we cannot no longer bill them for that, for the encroachment. But part of it, we will see next year because they remember I just said hold harmless for 1 year. Next year, it's going to hit us. So it's split in 2 years. And yes.
Are there any more charter schools coming in that would help with that encroachment issue? Or is the loss of the ADA more problematic?
Well, I think loss of ADA next year, I think they put out like a weekend notice very late. So next year, maybe we can adjust our staffing maybe to somehow we'll have some savings there. But this year, when they pulled out last minute, even though they have been talking about that for a long time, but we did not get official notice until very late, and it's hard for us to react. But now we can probably look at how we want to adjust the services so, we can have some savings by losing some of the special ed students because of Avison pull out.
When you say they pulled out, do you mean that they've decided to
Leave.
have their own SELPA?
Yes, they joined another SELPA.
They joined another SELPA. Okay.
Right.
I have a question about the those monies because it's almost $600,000, but clearly because they were under the SELPA, the PUSD SELPA,
right.
We were contributing for personnel to be there. So,
right.
What is do we have a number of what that global loss is, or are clearly we were spending probably less than. There's a reason why they decided to go on their own. They could choose. I know they wanted to choose who they could hire. That's it was an important factor. Not hire the next person on the list. They wanted to hire who was most appropriate for the kids that they're serving. But were we spending anywhere near the $600,000? Does anyone have that number?
No, I don't have that number, but I think first of all they don't have SDC just for Avison, right?
That's correct. Just
Do they have a program specialist for them though?
Yeah.
well, no, it's not really like a program specialist that was totally like to them or anything. What they had was basically a special ed teacher that was providing services for the individuals. But say if they needed speech services, then of course we're going to give the speech services and the other services. But
assessments.
Assessments.
Yeah. Right. So, and next one is mental health. We receive federal, state funding for that. We hope those will be ongoing, but federal is probably one time. And then I think in the future, you know, before we don't see the money and we don't pay for the service, but now it's in our hand. Hopefully, we will adjust well and not encroach in this area. But I think it's out of our hands, you know, because we still use county's service. When they say, oh, this kid, this residential placement, we pretty much just have to pay, correct? Do we have a say in that?
Well, yes, we do always have a say because it's always the IEP's determination. Right now, we're still using LA County Mental Health to do our assessments. But then when it comes to the IEP, that's when we have to have that discussion. Does a student require, because we've always provided the educational services, whether it's non-public school and everything. But the question now is coming is, does the child need these services based on an educational or is it through a medical model? That's where a lot of the divisions be going. It's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of confusion among all the different districts within the state. So that's where we really have to have more procedures and talking a lot more about it. It's still being developed right now. We haven't presented it to the board because after July 1, the responsibility of all mental health comes to us as a district.
Yeah.
So with all those types of related services, so we have to have those kinds of discussions and decisions. If a child requires those services, like say the student's having more problems at home versus is able to contain themselves within the school, that's when we would look at more at this is probably not educationally related. That's why they don't need the residential services. So, but some students will need some residential.
Right, but if it's in our hands, and I hope from the budget perspective, we will get a better projection. We know where we stand, that sort of thing. So, I think in a way, it's also good. Ending of special ed mandate settlement that we have been receiving $100,000 for 10 years, and it's now gone. And I mentioned $2.2 million SDA revenue is gone, and ARA is gone, and transportation is depends on whether the November election will pass. Then the governor will give us one more year, but the year after that is definitely a goner. So we have to prep for that.
2014.
Yes.
Could you just briefly elaborate on the special education mandate settlement? It's gone, but what was that for those who don't know? Also, the loss of the 2.2 million, SDA revenue. Could you just elaborate on that a bit? And also transportation. I know what you're talking about, but maybe there are other people who don't.
Well, I think 10 years ago, it's a mandate that some districts sue the state, and then the state said, okay, I'm going to give you money, but I'm going to spread that into 10 years. You're not getting the whole thing. So for 10 years, we get $100,000 every year, and that's a big chunk of money. But once that schedule is up, then we no longer get that money. But I don't recall the exact mandate that they're suing for. But anyway, it's to our favor. I don't need to know too much. I get the money and say thank you very much. We need that.
So the SDA revenue?
SDA is a special disability adjustment. I think it's also unique to us. I'm not saying unique to our district, but the dollar amount that we receive is at a very high level compared to other districts. So when we lose that money, it's really hurting.
And why did we lose it?
The governor just say,
Yeah, it was more of like even out the different funding across the state, because some of the different SELPAs were saying, well, we have a higher level of students coming with autism coming into our districts and stuff. So what they used to do is give a lot more funding for certain districts that had a higher population. Say like within ours, we have a high LCI population, we have a high, those types of groups when you look at it. So we were getting some adjusted basically revenue for that. But a lot of the SELPAs are like, hey, wait a minute, we have this higher level, so this money needs to be more distributed more evenly. So that's when the discussion was coming around, so we kind of lost when this wasn't. And then we weren't alone. We're not the only district. Some other districts lost about equal or even more than us.
Right. So whenever I see adjustment, the revenue come in as adjustment, I just cringed because I know adjustment. That means that they will try to even even it out. Eventually, we're going to lose it. So I really don't like those adjustments.
If I can interrupt for just a moment, we have less than 5 minutes. Joyce has approximately 3 more slides to get through. So if you have a question, I'm going to ask that you hold it until she finishes the slide, because we're going to run over a few minutes, but I don't want it to be any more than necessary, and we have homework. So go ahead, Joyce.
Okay. So the next slide's really the previous slide. We talked about revenue, but this one is about expenditure. And in 11-12, we did have some budget reduction that was implemented, so that would should save us some money. And also the non-public school contract, that's the one area that we monitor very, very closely, because it's about every year we encumber probably $5-6 million, but usually we won't pay as much. But we monitor that very closely because it's all those kids we send to the non-public school. And the mental health cost, for residential placement, that's an area we're going to pay close attention because it's really new, very new to us. And the legal cost, and that's an area and probably needs some cost containment, but again, it's sometimes it's out of our control.
Can you give us a dollar number on the legal costs? We've been asking every meeting.
Legal cost, it fluctuates. If we have a big lawsuit, then we can pay hundreds of dollars.
It can vary because you can have one settlement that can easily cost over a couple $100,000 very quickly. We've experienced one. It kind of varies. We got hit last year with about $169,000 settlement. That was just the settlement with that. I mean, some districts, there's one, and I'm trying to think of it's down towards the by the ocean. I'm trying to think of it as Manhattan Beach. I mean, they lost a $6.7 million settlement, and as well, CDE got part of that one as well. So. And that's when we're really trying to look within the district is really breaking up our legal costs, because then it breaks it down to the settlement, looking at our attorney fees, their attorney fees, looking at everything. So when we see an amount of everything, it's not really pictured very correctly. I mean, it could be one settlement or 2 big settlements within there. So that's what kind of changes. I'm trying to think what was it was.
To answer their questions, though,
$700,000 kind of a thing.
Yeah, in the October 17th or October 18th presentation that Dr. Papalardo did, about 4 years ago, it was around $400,000, and last year it was like $720,000.
Yeah.
But that's everything. But that's one reason we're trying to break it down, because that's when the 1 year we had a $169,000 settlement, and then we had another one for about 70. So when you have just one simple settlement with that amount, that's when it can throw off what our legal costs truly look like, because you can have 1 year and have nothing. Yeah. And another time it goes up. I mean, when you look at between like 1 year is like 400,000, you see this other one, when it goes really high up, you can have 2 big cases, you're going to go skyrocket. So that's where it gets very difficult of looking at each of the different cases.
Yeah, and another one we're going to kind of look at is the consultants, and sometimes we have some recruitment difficulty. We have to hire outside firm to provide services, like a speech pathologist. It's an area. It's an area very, very difficult to recruit. So those are the things we are watching, and then hopefully, by when we adopt a budget in June, we will have a very good projection for our total, and then we have a ending balance that will be higher than we projected. Yes.
I wanted to, because these numbers jump out, and I think the public needs to know. We hear, I don't like using the word encroachment because it seems like we're taking away from someone, and when in fact we know that
deficit. it, or?
I like using general fund contribution.
Yeah.
So we'll see that the contribution, it looks like it increased, but in all reality, it has decreased when you take into consideration the reduction in the federal funds and the SDA, the 2.2 million less, plus the American Recovery Reinvestment Act monies,
Right.
which you indicated that about half of that needed to stay in special ed. So if it was was it 7 million?
About 6.5.
6.5. So 6.5 million were supposed to stay within special ed. That's about, let's say 3 million is half, right? So if 3 million, we're not getting the ARA money, the 3 million plus 2.2 million, we're already beyond 5 million in less revenue. But I'm looking at the numbers, and it doesn't show that our revenue is, the revenue difference is about 3.3 million. So anyways, I know there's probably other gyrations and numbers and things that are different. But I think the public should just know that the general fund contribution is actually going down. Yes. And as a matter of fact, when it got reviewed when we were audited a few years ago, our general fund contribution was actually less than the average school district in the state. Anyone thinking that we're overspending on special ed is, they're wrong.
Yeah, also you also need to look at the enrollment and services we provide, a lot of other factors. So if everybody just look at the very last page, last 2 slides, and you can see the trend, and then the numbers just jump out at you from 2010-11 to 11-12, because the SDA revenue we lost, and also some other the ARA funds and all that. So if you take those factors out, the contribution is not that much. Compared to 10-11. So that's basically the numbers explain itself. Yeah.
Wasn't there a reason they called it maintenance of effort?
The reason, because I think
instead of calling it an encroachment number.
Well, the maintenance effort, I think the federal government wants to make sure that you don't supplant. They give you funds. They don't want you to use the funds to supplant, right? You should have. You run the program. The federal funding is ready to supplement your program. It's not for you to supplant. Say, oh, you give me the money, now I can save my money for something else. Now I'm gonna use all your funds to run my program. So I think that's the mechanism to make sure that the districts are not doing that.
Can I interject? I think I heard at the state level they did talk about being a little more flexible, of allowing the districts to supplant, because they knew tight times were going to be tough. But I think regarding the maintenance of effort, it was when I read it, and I remember we used to talk about this a lot, Monica. It was that the district maintain its effort, that they do not. If monies go down, they don't stop services. That means then the general fund contribution would go up. So that, I think, is the key, is that no matter what, they're going to fire the football coach before they fire the aide that the kid needs to learn.
I believe that's what I remember from the Ed Code, but maybe it changed. I don't know.
I think that's pretty much. I think the numbers, you can kind of look at it. If you have any questions, give me a call. And as I mentioned, this is a very high level kind of overview, but we can definitely change gear. If you guys want to see something, in a different way, then we can talk about it. Well, first, I would recommend people to look at the second interim report to see what kind of information
is in there. And if you want more information, then maybe in the future meetings, we can talk about it and see how we can present them and make it more meaningful or useful to you.
Last question.
It's not a question. Leonard, can you please share with the folks what low incidence disabilities are? Because some folks may not know.
Your low disability, those are looking at your orthopedically impaired, your vision, blind, deaf. Is pretty much, it's very specific on certain populations, and when they have those types of disabilities, we get about, I think it's about $350 extra for each of the students when they have those disabilities. So sometimes those students may require a higher level of services or specialized equipment. Like say if it's augmented alternate communication devices, that's when we will be saying it's based on those types of low incident disabilities. We can be able to use those funds to actually purchase some of those types of equipment, depending on the students.
I just have a question.
Last question.
Yes. First, I want to know, how is special ed going to deal with the fact of the reduction of transportation? What's the plan for that? And then maybe next time, if we do have another discussion about the budget, it'd be helpful to see not only the revenue and expenditures, but how that actually relates into a plan for special education in PUSD. Like, how are we dealing with the increase in expenditures, and how does that plan relate to what's going to happen next year as far as reductions in force or layoffs or changes in programs? I think that would be helpful as well.
Thank you.
That would be quite challenging.
Is it possible?
I have a format about 4 years ago that did. I could give it to you.
Check it out and look at it.
Maybe we can
Yeah.
discuss more.
It's just easier to understand for like people.
Mm-hmm. Maybe next time we can look at by resource.
Yeah, we can do it by resource.
Yeah, to see different pot of money, how they are used, and maybe that will help. But I think you already have that information from the very first meeting, right?
We gave you, when we gave you this,
the list, the budget.
The list, budget.
Those are by resource. So it's federal and state and local resource, and they are broken down by resource.
Mm-hmm. What is our plan to save in money, basically? How are we going to deal with the fact that we're losing money? How is that going to transform, or does it transform the way that we provide services?
I'm not sure.
If I could just,
I
think I understand what you're saying, and just to further that, when we come down to it, the high level view is great, and I appreciate that. Ultimately, I think we need to change the way we're thinking in terms of how we're using this money. We have to know what the source, specifically how much money is coming in and how we're effectively using that. For example, the busing, the transportation issue. Ultimately, one of the recommendations, one of the priorities is that every school is going to be an inclusive school. Every child, every student is going to attend a home school. So, in essence, the transportation issue should not be an issue going forward if the district is acting upon these priorities and things of that nature. So I think when we start looking at implementation plans, we really need to dig deeper in terms of how we're apportioning this money. If we just keep the same old thinking, we're never going to get anywhere. We have to really
but
take a
we
fresh
also
look.
have finance subcommittee meeting, and I don't know whether the task force meeting will make a recommendation through to them, or
Work, yeah. We'll have to find out more.
we have to discuss more on that, how we can.
Okay. Thank you, Joyce, very, very much. Thank you. There's a few things that we need to cover just before you go. They are some homework assignments. And this is actually a wonderful segue from something that was just said. When we went through the voting exercise 2 weeks ago, the observation that was made by several people was, this seems to fit with this seems to fit with this, I'm not sure where to vote. You applied your votes. The results of the recommendation tally were included in the email, and what you saw was just my attempt This is not official. It was simply my attempt at grouping some of those items so that as we move to developing action plans, we are actually taking a more complete view of some of those recommendations rather than kind of breaking them line by line, but really creating recommendations or action plans that, again, are a more complete view. So this is homework assignment number 1. Everyone received this via email. Did not? Okay.
I made copies.
Oh, great.
The unfortunate thing is the copies are black and white. Okay.
I would say assigned priorities.
So what you'll see is the assigned priority is in the 3rd column. It goes 1 through 12 based on the ranking, the number of votes that each item received. For those of you who have access to color, you'll see my attempt at grouping some of the recommendations topically. I need you as homework to actually just mark on the document and try to group some of these, again, to create a more complete picture. An example, 3.1, access to core curriculum, and then 1.1, addition of inclusive schools and diversification of inclusive programs. You know, it was an observation in the room. Wow, you know, those two are they're very closely related. So I want you to make that attempt between now and Saturday, because we need to be ready to go Saturday morning with actually having these items grouped so that we can then move to the next step of action plans, developing action plans. Now, there's several things that we need to do. Prioritizing, developing action plans, and then the identification of institutional and organizational obstacles that prevent achieving optimal environments. And that's item number 6. So our goals Saturday are items 4, 6, 7, and we're going to do our best to encompass 7A. So for that reason, your charts that you've done tonight will be turned into one document, and then we'll actually do an exercise that will help us to identify obstacles, because you'll want to do that before you develop the action plans. Okay, so again, Saturday, I need you to come in with item 4 done. We'll have a conversation, see where agreement lies, and then we'll move into 6 and 7 and 7A. I'm sorry.
Is it from the agenda?
Yes. 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 Okay. Are there any questions about what our plans are for Saturday? Yes.
Just bring food.
Yeah. Yeah. Bring enough for 20 people.
And Ruth can bring good food too.
Everyone should bring something for themselves and be willing to share. Okay. Okay. Also, that is why Mr. Albanese needed to leave. His children were next door, and so he needed to get them home. Yeah, he wanted to let everyone know he wasn't just, abandoning us. Yes. So does everyone understand the homework assignment for between now and Saturday morning?
You call that homework number 1. What's homework number 2?
Homework number 2 is, I've actually written it down here. Oh, I'm sorry. Homework number 2 is actually the subcommittee. We have to get together and kind of refine our definition. Yeah. We're going to do our best. Even if it's an email conversation, we're going to do our best. All right, everyone understand what needs to be done by Saturday? That will help us to come in the room, be productive, and walk out feeling that we actually accomplished something really, really big. All righty. Thank you, everybody.